Breaking It Down with Frank MacKay. This is 103.9 LI News Radio.
I'd like to welcome everyone to Breaking It Down. Our special guest today is a singer from a very, very popular band, Cinderella, Tom Keifer. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing well. How are you, my friend?
Doing great. Listen, a lot of people remember you from the hair days. You still look the same?
Well, I guess the hair's a little shorter, but pretty similar, I guess.
I mean, that was a time period where, forget it. I mean, it's I had my hair was as long as your hair, but I mean, it was a time period that really gets overlooked for whatever reason. It doesn't get the respect it does, but I mean, there's a lot of success. You guys had some platinum records, and of course, Bon Jovi, one of your colleagues, Bon Jovi, did so well, and so many of those bands. And again, I'm not trying to group you all together, but Guns N' Roses and Poison and a lot of bands from that era had such success and sold so many records. Do you feel the time period has been ignored?
I don't know. I think that there was a lot of great music created, and I think that the decade of the 80s in terms of rock and even some of the pop music and stuff, there was such a flamboyant, over-the-top look that I think all the artists gravitated towards because of the advent of MTV, and we suddenly had a camera to play to 24/7. That whole thing that happened with the video revolution or whatever, it made, the decade just blow up so big. And then what happens is, people always want to label things and lump things together. And I think what happens is, I don't think the decade gets ignored, but I think that people don't maybe necessarily separate the good from the bad, maybe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. And, it's interesting. I think if my memory serves me, Cinderella started somewhere around the year 1980, right? Am I right about that?
Yeah, we formed right around then, around 80, 81.
So you really had
the first record in 85.
So you had the whole decade to really assess it, and you saw the advent of MTV, and you were together before that. The band got signed in 85, right?
Yeah, 85. Actually, I think I just said first record came out in 85. Actually, I think it came out in 86.
86, right. So maybe you got signed in 85.
I don't remember.
Well, it's all right. We could be approximate.
Well, let's call it mid-80s.
Right. Yeah. Actually, in the big picture, it really doesn't matter. It's the time period that we're talking about. But let's talk about where you were born, where you grew up. Were you Philly? Born and bred?
Yeah, I grew up right outside of Philadelphia in Delaware County.
Delaware County, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, correct.
Yeah. Now, who did you grow up listening to?
Oh, man. I grew up in the 70s, so just amazing bands and musicians and artists and songwriters from then. I loved Zeppelin and Rod Stewart and Aerosmith and Joe Walsh and the James Gang and Deep Purple and Heart and Bad Company and Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles and Leonard Skinner. I mean, I could go on and on.
You mentioned a bunch of bands there that, you mentioned Rod Stewart in there and even Heart. You mentioned a bunch of people that had a lot of emotional rasp in their voice, and you were really known for that. Did your style develop anywhere early on because of that? And were you compared to anybody early on? Well,
when I played in cover bands, I was the guy that could sing, the high Robert Plant stuff. And that's where I learned that upper scream and also Rod Stewart. And I love Janis Joplin, one of my heroes. So I've always really loved that very passionate upper register blues screaming thing, and my voice just felt natural in that area. But I would say probably what started me down that road was probably Robert Plant.
I guess a lot of people in that area, everyone loved Zeppelin at that time. That was the big band.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now, if I remember correctly, and I want to jump back to your upbringing a little later, but it was Larry Mazer, right? Was he your original manager?
Yeah, he was Cinderella's first real manager. Yeah.
Right. So he was your first real manager, and he was a club manager or a club promoter. Is that right?
No, he was. I mean, when we met him, he was a manager. He managed bands. I forget who he had at the time, but he had a bunch of bands that he managed.
But you were the band that really kind of pushed him over the top. As soon as you guys came along, and as soon as you hit with that first album, all of a sudden Larry Mazer just kind of took off.
Yeah, I think we were, his first really big successful band.
Where did you come across him? Where did you meet Larry Mazer?
Honestly, I don't even remember. I think it was actually a guy we were working at in a studio. Knew that we were looking for a manager and recommended him, if I remember correctly. Now,
were you guys big in, just give me a little history lesson of Cinderella. Were you big in your local club area? Was that the story? Would you kind of built your local story and you built a following?
Eventually we were. When Cinderella formed, I made the decision to pull out. I was playing in cover bands 7 nights a week, and I decided I wanted to start writing songs. So I stopped. I got a day gig, God forbid, right? The dirty word, and just wrote songs and put the band together, and we started doing demos, and we didn't really play out anywhere because nowhere would, I wanted the band to be all original from the beginning. I didn't want to make the same mistake that I've seen other cover bands do, where you be like, we do covers all night, and then we'll throw in one of ours for you, And I just didn't think that was a way to really develop your own sound. So just said, forget covers, pulled out of the club scene, and started just working on, original material. And there weren't a lot of places you could play where there was original material. There were actually 2 clubs in the area, the Galaxy in Somerdale, New Jersey, and which we started playing at maybe once a month. And then the Empire Rock Club in Northeast that we played at about once a month. So we only played out when we started playing out, we only played out about twice a month. And the following started to grow in both those clubs. But we never really played before we got signed, other than really those 2 clubs a couple times a month. And that was it. We were just, other than that, we were making demos and sending them out to anyone who would listen to them and trying to get a record company involved. So.
If you're just tuning in now, we are talking to Tom Keifer, lead singer of the band Cinderella. Do you do solo work currently, or are you just concentrating on Cinderella?
Actually, I'm not concentrating on Cinderella at all right now. I have a solo record out that came out last year, and I toured behind that record last year with a solo band for most of the year. And we will be touring this year behind the solo record. The label's going to be releasing more singles, and we've got dates throughout the summer, and we'll be touring into the fall.
Yeah. Now, you recently played within the last couple of years. You were touring with Cinderella, weren't you?
Yeah, we toured. We've toured a bunch since we reformed in '98, and we've done a bunch of tours since then. The last one was in 2012, which we decided to take a break because we had toured a lot. And that lined up perfectly with, I had just signed this record deal with Meravi Records. And as I mentioned, they released The Way Life Goes, which is my solo record, last year. And we've just been touring behind that with a solo band that I put together ever since, and we're going to continue through this year.
Now, that being said, how do you like the new music business? Because it has changed dramatically since you started and to this point. How do you like it?
It's very different. Having a new record out, it's almost like being a new artist, because I'm experiencing a very different time in the industry. And that time is where, so much music just gets taken off a line. People hear music that they like, and they just either listen to it streaming or on YouTube, or they illegally download it. So the business is very different from that sense, because record companies and publishing companies and the people who develop artists and promote artists don't have near the revenues they used to have. So it's a very different game in terms of trying to get signed and make a quality record and have it promoted well. So.
And was there ever any consideration with your solo stuff to do it yourself and not sign with a record deal? And what would be the advantage of that?
Well, we actually produced it ourselves. We did not. There was no label involved when the record was produced, and actually spent about the better part of 9 years making the record, just kind of off and on. It started off as not really even being a record. It was, just let's go out in the studio and record a few songs, and then one thing led to another, and we just kept working on it for years, and then woke up one day and it felt like a record. And then we decided to shop it to a label. And I really think in this day and age, that's the best way to go, is to, most labels want to hear a finished record anyway, They want to know what they're getting into. They want to know what they're putting their money into. So that worked out well in this situation, taking a finished record around to labels, and we found a label that was really excited about it.
Tom Keifer is our special guest, and he is the singer of, he's Tom Keifer. He's got his solo project going, and many people remember Tom as being the lead singer of Cinderella. And you haven't closed the door on Cinderella, right? I mean, you'll eventually do something again, or you don't know at this point?
Well, I mean, for the last 10, 12 years or so, all we've done is toured. We've had a couple failed attempts at putting out a record. One deal that ended up in a lawsuit and got pretty ugly, but we still tour. We're on a pretty extended break right now, though. The only thing we did this year was we did 2 shows on the Monsters of Rock cruise back in March, but that's all Cinderella was going to do this year. So
many people are saying, I mean, I think recently Aerosmith said, it's not even worth doing a record, and that's so disappointing because it kind of takes it takes the fan base by surprise, because they're not looking at it from a practical standpoint. They're looking at it like, hey, we'd like to hear more music. But the thing is, if they want to pay for it, it's one thing. If they want to illegally download it, they're right. It isn't worth it. But more and more bands are opting just to tour. And it used to be that you'd get a record deal and you'd tour in order to promote the record. Now it's if anything, it's the other way around. You'd put out a record just to help you raise the profile of the band, or hopefully get some kind of exposure that might lead to more gigs. I mean, do you see it like that?
Well, I think, whoever was that made that statement that you said about it's not, hardly worth it to even make a record. I think, from one standpoint, I mean, it's hard just getting your own fan base to know that you have a record. I'm sure all bands experience that, because there's so much noise and so much traffic on the internet. There's so much, the whole society is just overstimulated with multimedia. Here's another song, here's another movie, here's another book, here's another this, here's another that. This band's got 10 records out. This band's got, so, I think that the name of the game is, and what, we tried to do in producing the record on our own was, let's make sure we're making a really quality record. And then the second component is to find a label who understands that it probably takes a little bit longer to break a record or to get the record even to your fan base, let alone new fans. So, there's plenty of records that are still blowing up these days. And if you look at any of them that are, a lot of them took, 18 months, 2 years to break the first single, but those artists had very committed record labels who believed. And it's not like back in the 80s when we would just put out a video and bam, you'd be platinum overnight. It doesn't work that way anymore. So, on one hand, if you don't have the legs to stay in the race for a long time, it might not seem worth releasing a record, because it's hard even getting the word to your own fan base with how much traffic and noise is out there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it does.
But, if you stay in the game and, you have a good record and keep working it and have a committed label, I mean, there's still a lot of records that are reaching people out there, so...
Well, I mean, we started off by you making the point that you needed that flamboyance in the beginning because it was all about MTV. I mean, you'd get that single going, and the video along with it, and that would take it from there. I mean,
and there's no one outlet that's that powerful anymore. Back then there was just a handful of outlets that if you were lucky enough to get signed, and then your publicist and your label would get you on MTV, and they'd get you in all the rock magazines and get you on tour and the radio. Those 4 things was enough to do it. Now there's just so many there's so many outlets now by which music and media is just bombarding society out there that not one holds the same power that just one of the 4 back then had. So it's kind of like an everything and anything game these days, I think, to really get the word out there.
Singer-songwriter Tom Keifer is our special guest today, and And Tom, let's jump back to Philadelphia, growing up in Philadelphia, and you mentioned a lot of the bands, and a lot of them make sense. I mean, even Janis Joplin, I hear that in your voice. There's no question that you've got that kind of emotion, and that kind of you could hear that influence happening. But let's start way back. When did you first either pick up a guitar or touch a piano or a microphone? What was the first time you did anything that resembled music?
When I saw the Beatles on TV, I was probably about 7 or 8. I told my mom that I wanted to play guitar. So she had a teacher come to the house, and she bought me a little 3/4 size acoustic guitar. And that's the first I started playing. I was probably 8 years old, and the teacher taught me Beatles songs. And he made me sing and play them, too. So I think that's why I ended up being a singer, songwriter, guitar player. That all feels like one thing to me. And it probably goes back to when I was 8, sitting in my mom's living room with this teacher who would, put up songbooks. And he taught me guitar, like the basic chords, but he would make me strum the chords and sing the songs, too. And we would do the Beatles songs and like American folk songs, and I liked that TV show The Monkees back then too, so I'd be learning some of their songs, and that's really where it started for me. And then a few years later, I heard Led Zeppelin, and then I wanted an electric guitar, and it was all over. That's what I wanted to do.
What did your folks do?
They were both teachers.
Yeah, my father was a teacher for 40 years. He was a math teacher.
Yeah.
What did they teach? Any music teachers in there?
My mom was an elementary school teacher, 4th and 5th grade, so she taught all, subjects. And my dad was science in junior high.
Now, what about siblings? Are you an only child, or do you have brothers and sisters?
No, I have 3 sisters.
3,
two older and 1 younger.
Any of them musical?
My youngest sister played piano a little bit. The older 2, they played some instruments here and there, but never really took to it. When they were younger, everybody gives it a try, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when you talk about people being teachers, it's a very stable life. You get tenure, and I don't know what the tenure situation was like in Pennsylvania, but you get tenure, and it's you're locked into something. Music, especially rock music, and trying to make it in a band is so opposite, such the opposite of that of security. Did you get pushback from your parents when they decided when you decided what you were doing, or were they supportive from day one?
They were supportive from day one until when it was time to. Well, actually, the first conflict was when I actually wanted to leave high school, not finish high school, to join an East Coast touring cover band. And my mom bribed me to stay in and get my diploma by saying she'd buy me a Les Paul.
Wow.
That was in the local music store. I had an Ibanez copy, and I wanted a real Gibson. And there was one hanging on the wall at McLaren Music out in Derby. And so I passed with D's, and I got my Les Paul. And then the next standoff was I said, okay, I'm not going to college. And then they said, well, you're out of here. And they gave me the boot. They gave me a few bucks to get started. And they just wanted to teach me a lesson about how hard life was. And when they saw that I stuck with the music, even though it was hard, then they became more accepting and more supportive at that point, and realized that I really wasn't going to go to college and I was going to stick with the music thing. So, but they were trying to teach me a lesson.
I know it's not the point, but do you still have that Les Paul today?
I sure do.
Yeah. What's it worth compared to what you paid for it back then?
Oh gosh, I have no idea. I mean, if I remember, it cost maybe about $400 or $500 back then. I don't know what it's worth now. When I bought it, it was a tobacco sunburst, and I had it refinished to black, and it's actually the black Les Paul that I play in all those early Cinderella videos.
Oh,
and I still have it. It's hanging on the wall.
Well,
here at the house.
Well, that's a hell of an investment. That thing paid itself off 100 times. Yeah,
I wrote a few songs on it.
Yeah, no question. Now, when you got to the point where, and again, 5 years from 1980 to 1985, getting the deal, that's a while. So it's not like you're an overnight sensation. It's not like everything just fell in your lap. It's anything but. And you're doing this while being kicked out of your house and being taught a lesson by your parents. At any point, is there you questioning whether you should have taken that gig with the East Coast Touring Band, the copy band?
Well, I actually did it. I mean, after I got my diploma and got my Les Paul, I did join a number of bands that were playing cover songs, and I did the whole cover thing. I actually started playing in cover bands my last year of high school. I'd play all night and then go to school, like on 2 hours sleep, and I continued doing the cover thing in Philadelphia and South Jersey for a number of years. And then, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, that I just got tired of that. And then I decided to start writing my own music, and that's how Cinderella formed.
We have about a minute left in this segment with Tom Keifer. Tom, do we have you for a second segment?
Yes, I believe so.
All right, great. I would love to keep you on, but we have about a minute left. In that group of people that were out there touring with the cover bands at that particular moment, and especially the band that you passed on to finish high school with Dee's, anybody we know of come out of that group? Is there anybody else other than yourself make it out of that group of people that were trying to make it, doing the cover tunes? Out of the
club circuit that I played with, there's a number of bands that came out of Philadelphia that were in that same cover.
What was it like? Brittany Fox? Were they?
Well, yeah, Brittany Fox was one of them, and Michael Kelly Smith was in an early version of Cinderella. And there was also, John Corabi was part of that whole club circuit then.
And he went on to play with Motley Crue, sing with Motley Crue.
Yeah, and done some stuff on his own, too. Very talented guy. Yeah, so there were a number of people there. I believe a band called Heaven's Edge, too, that came out of that club circuit that did quite well for themselves. So.
No question. Hey, we're coming right up on a break. Tom, stay with us if you would. Just a reminder, Tom Keifer is our guest, and he'll be back with us right after this.
Breaking It Down with Frank MacKay. This is 103.9 LI News Radio.
And we're back. Tom Keifer, singer-songwriter Tom Keifer, is our special guest, and Tom is touring, or he does shows in support of his solo album, but you may remember him from Cinderella. And again, that band had such great success, Tom. It's hard to get away from it. I know you're Tom Keifer, but you're always going to be somehow tied to Cinderella, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah, and I'm very proud of what we accomplished. Now, I'm feel fortunate to have been a part of the success of that band. Yeah, the record was made by, as I mentioned, we spent almost better part of 9 years making it here in Nashville. So I used really great session players here on the record. And then when it came time to tour last year, back, I guess it was last January when we started putting together a band, I found put together a really, really great band of a bunch of local guys here that I know. So it's a pretty kick-ass band, the solo band.
Yeah, how do you like that part of it? How many kids do you have?
One child is 10 years old.
Has he picked up that guitar yet?
He tried it. He's more of an athlete. He loves baseball.
Yeah, that's okay. Hey, listen, he's got the weather for it down there.
Yeah, and he's very talented at it too. So.
What does he do? He pitches, or he's a fielder? What does he do?
Yeah, he likes to pitch, and he plays third base a lot too.
Well, listen, that's nice. There's plenty of time for music. Music usually doesn't start up seriously until girls get involved and puberty gets involved. So, if he goes all the way through with baseball, hey, so be it. A lot of money to be made.
That's his love. Ever since he could stand, he was swinging a bat. So.
How about you? Were you an athlete in high school?
I played a little bit of sports. I loved football, and I loved, growing up in Philadelphia, ice hockey. The Flyers. I remember the Broad Street Bullies, the Flyers, and the year they won the Stanley Cup, 2 years in a row, actually. And I was all about hockey then, and we played street hockey. Actually, Barry Ashby was one of the Flyers who lived right down the street from me, and he'd come out and show us how it was really done.
Wow.
It was pretty cool.
Well, it's a nice neighbor to have. That was...
Yeah, he was... I learned a lot from him.
That was some team. I don't know if you ran into, afterwards or once you had your success with Cinderella, did you run into like Bobby Clark and Dave Schultz and all those guys, Perrant?
I never met any of them, but, they were like, growing up and being into hockey, they were like big heroes to me because I love their whole, underdog scrapping mentality,
Tough team, that's for sure. A very, very tough team. If you're just tuning in, again, our guest is Tom Keifer, singer-songwriter Tom Keifer, coming out of Nashville. How many years now in Nashville, Tom?
Been here since 97, like 16 years, I guess.
You located down
16,
there?
17 years.
So you located down there out of love? You met your wife and you moved down there, or was it something else?
Well, she was here before me, but I moved here. I was starting to, mid-'90s, Cinderella had parted ways with Mercury Records, and we no longer had an outlet through a label for music, and I was looking to do something new. And that's actually when I first started thinking about making a solo record. So I needed a shot in the arm and some fresh blood. So I started working down here with songwriters and hanging out at some of the sessions and witnessing some of the incredible musicianship here. And I thought, wow, this would be a great place to make a record because I'm not in a band anymore. I moved here, and no sooner did I move here and started working on a solo record, and Cinderella got offered a record deal. And that's the one that I mentioned ended up in the lawsuit and got really ugly. But it put my solo thing on the back burner for quite a few years. And I eventually came back to the solo record in 2003, and that's when I actually started cutting tracks and producing the record. And spent forever just making it because there was no label breathing down my neck.
It's a shame how much the business end gets in the way of making the record or a band doing things. It's a shame. But let's touch on the business end a little bit. The famous story is that Bon Jovi saw you, and again, I don't know how much of this is legend or whatever, but he saw you in a club. Is that what happened?
Yeah, he saw us at the Empire Rock Club.
And what happened? He checked out your whole set. He had somebody come over to you, and what's the story? You mind telling it?
Yeah. Well, what's kind of funny is Gene Simmons took an interest in the band before that and tried to get Mercury Records involved, and he just couldn't get anyone interested. So Gene really was the first to take an interest. And then John just wandered into a club we were playing, and he was in town making his second record, 7,800 Degrees Fahrenheit. And he came backstage after the show and said, wow, I really enjoyed your show. And we knew who he was because Runaway had been a hit. So for us, it was like, oh, that's that guy from MTV. It's pretty cool, And he was just, very complimentary and just said, great meet you. And we split. And then a couple days later, as you mentioned, Larry Mazer, our manager, told us, well, that Bon Jovi guy really liked your show because he went back and told his A&R guy. And Derek already had demo tapes, but our demos were awful. And he said to John, yeah, I'm thinking about it. I got their demos. It's not very good. And supposedly what was uttered in the office, I wasn't there, that was probably the X factor or game changer for us, was supposedly John said, forget the demo tape, go see him live. So Derek came out and saw the band, and in typical A&R guy fashion, was still not convinced and wanted to hear more songs and signed us to a 6-month developmental deal and put us through the ringer for 6 months, and then he eventually signed us to a full deal. So be forever grateful for whatever John uttered in that office because it, certainly who knows where we'd be.
Do you still keep in touch with John?
Every once in a while. I saw him play here in Nashville not too long ago, and we exchanged an email. But, we're both busy touring, and, a lot of the people that you work with and tour with, that goes on. So we're all over the place and don't always run into each other. So
do you know our experience? I'm from Long Island, right? And our Cinderella experience was that you came out to a club and you really put this club on the map. My brother and myself were booking it. My brother was interning at Polygram as in video promotion, and he knew about you guys before the deal. And you played a place called Sundance.
Sundance, that's right.
You did a benefit. I don't know that people were there to see you, but you blew away the crowd. You were booked for a weekend, and if I remember correctly, it was Larry Vaughn was the promoter, brought you guys in, and you were booked for the whole weekend. And at that point, the record I think just released. It packed the place.
I remember that show.
But I mean, you guys launched. I don't think you guys know this, but you really launched that club, and that club, which we had, for reason of full disclosure, we had some involvement in the club, but you launched that club, which actually turned around a whole scene here because there was no scene on Long Island, prior to that. As it was dying out, drinking age changed, but when you guys did that weekend, it was off to the races.
Yeah, I remember it was a pretty wild show.
Yeah, well, a couple of shows. You did 3 shows real quick, but you had a huge tremendous effect. It was, it was happenstance, but it made me think of it. You made me think of it when you said, allegedly John Bon Jovi said you got to see him live. It changed the whole scene around here. You guys were a great live band, and I should say are a great live band when you perform live. And a lot of that is you. So I mean, kudos to you. I mean,
well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Now, again, Tom Keifer is our guest here. If you're just tuning in, we are with Tom Keifer, former singer of Cinderella, and I guess future singer of Cinderella, but also the solo record. Let's talk about that a little bit. Can you give us the name of it?
It's called The Way Life Goes.
Yeah. Okay. And how many tunes are on this record? Anything?
14.
And was there a single, or did it go like that, or you just kind of put out the record without a single?
We had two singles released last year, and they're releasing a couple more this year while we're touring.
And now, pardon my ignorance on it, but again, it is a different music business. Some people just put out the record and they don't even get involved with releasing a single.
No, my label's been releasing singles. We worked active in mainstream rock last year and had a pretty strong track at Solid Ground. And actually, the Flower song was worked at Top 40 and was in heavy rotation on Sirius XM on the Top 40 channel. So we've done pretty well so far, and the label wants to continue more this year.
And now, who do you tour with? Do you do your own tour, a headlining tour, or do you?
Well, we started off last year doing a bunch of small clubs and just kind of starting small. We actually started playing way before the record was released because I was trying to just create a new band and just become a band and all that. And then as the year went on, we got into some bigger shows, some fairs and festivals. We did some dates with Hailstorm, with Sammy Hagar. And then we kind of chilled towards the end of the year, and we're just starting to fire back up again now with some dates. And the label's going to go with a whole new cycle of singles. And so just having a great time doing it, too. I love the band and just very proud of the record. So
I asked this because of the family. You have a 10-year-old playing Little League, and none of us like to miss games. How many shows a year do you like to play?
Well, it depends. With Cinderella in recent years, in the last decade, we tour the summer months, usually end of May through August and September, and we've been on various packages and done our own headline shows too over the last 10, 12 years. The solo thing is completely different. We started off last year small, and we were kind of focusing on getting into radio markets where we had airplay. So it's been kind of on the road, off the road with this, and kind of a little more strategic because we're working a record now. Whereas with Cinderella, it's just like there's a touring season, there's a fan base, we go out and we play for 3 months and we go home. So this is a little bit of a different thing with the solo record.
Well, you shared the fact that 9 years in the making, this album was 9 years in the making, and that's a long time coming. Are you in the middle of, or are you in the process of putting another record? And do you imagine it's going to take that long to get it out?
I haven't even thought about that because we're still just having fun there and touring, and so not even thinking about that right now. And if that does come up, I hope to God it doesn't take 9 years.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I have a full recording studio at my house. So and then of course there's plenty to choose from here in Nashville. Yeah. I think there's like 100 studios every square mile here. So and we worked in a lot of those rooms too. We used our room here mainly for overdubs and we cut a lot of the tracks and keyboards and stuff in some of the bigger rooms in town here. So just whatever felt right for the song is what we did.
Tom Keifer, give us a website where people could follow you.
Well, there's Tom Keifer Music on Twitter, and then Facebook, Tom Keifer Official is probably the best place to go. There is a website, but it's not as updated as the Facebook is and Twitter are daily.
All right, Tom Keifer has been our special guest. Tom, thanks for your time, and good luck with the touring. Good luck with your son's baseball. That sounds great.
Oh, thank you so much. That's the fun things in life there. And pleasure talking to you. Have a great day.
Our special guest has been Tom Keifer.